Hello, I'm Harrison Fletcher. I love talking to people and I love my industry. So I wanted to be a little bit selfish. I wanted to start a podcast that felt like an open but honest conversation, one that explores all sides of the industry. This podcast gets very real very fast. It's open, it's honest, it's vulnerable. It's for you. Hello and welcome back to Insight. We're on episode 4 now, and yeah, I've got a really interesting guest for you today. I'm excited to jump in. We're going to do something a little bit different, but first of all, would you like to introduce yourself and tell people who is it? Who am I sat opposite?
Hi guys, thanks for inviting me on, Harrison.
No probs.
I'm Chris Pavey, and yeah, I'm a wedding videographer.
Wicked. So I've never done this before, so we're going to do. There's only like 4 quick questions. It's a quick fire round. So basically, you've got to pick one. So I'm going to give you some options.
Okay. Cool.
So you have to choose weddings or commercials. You can only pick one for the rest of your career.
Oh man, this is tough. I love different parts of weddings and commercial work. So weddings, like, they're just addictive in many ways. Like, everyone's having the best day of their lives, and it's really hard for that not to kind of soak in. And also, I love the fact that you're creating a film which you know is deeply personal to someone and is going to stay in their lives for generations. Yeah. And like, you know, the egotistical side of it is whenever you send the film off and you get that, you know, when you do get a good response from that, it's like, really plays my ego. I'm like, tell me why I'm amazing.
Keep carrying on.
Exactly.
I'll get used to this. Whereas I guess like in the commercial corporate world, it's very much the opposite of that. You're a piece of shit, man. Exactly. Not that you are.
That's the subject title of the email. You're a piece of shit. P.S. Thanks for the video.
Yeah, in brackets, ChatGPT did not write this. I wrote this personally.
On the commercial side, it's a weird one because people are attached to it. Because it's not their money that they're spending, it's a company's money, but they are attached to it because it is reflective of, I find, how well they're doing their jobs, you know, because they can go to the boss and be like, I, you know, headed up this project. What do you think of it? So they are attached to it, but not as emotionally, I suppose. Why I love commercial work is that because I come from a film background, I started off my working life in the film industry.
We'll touch on this a little bit later. There's a teaser.
A little teaser for later. And it kind of emulates that world a little bit. I find it really creatively fulfilling to be part of a big crew. Right. So I think what we do, and I think this is what is quite unique about being a wedding videographer, is inherently the anything involving a video camera is a creative role, and inherently most creative roles are collaborative, and we don't necessarily get that in the video world. I think as videographers, just to diverge a little bit, we have the luxury of always having a photographer with us, so we always have that creative partner to bounce ideas off. And I think as a wedding photographer, that's potentially one difficult thing because quite often they shoot alone. However, in the commercial world, on some of the projects I work on, I'm part of a bigger team, so I'm either directing or DOPing it, and I've got a gaffer, you know, I've got somebody with me who is maybe DOPing it for me if I'm shooting it. I'll have like a camera op. I'll have a team with me. Yeah, and from the kind of creative part of me, that's really fulfilling to be part of a bigger team and just to have somebody to bounce ideas off. So it's really hard to give you a really long answer.
So very long word.
I refuse to answer the question because I love both.
So okay, the next one's a little bit naff, but we'll go with it anyway. Okay. So what is one thing that you pretend to love about weddings but secretly don't?
Oh God, throw me on the bus straight away. What do I hate about weddings? I don't know. I think that, so going back to what I said about the days being contagious and the fact that everyone's having the best day, we're all human, we all have bad days, and I think you can never bring that into your work. And so I think for whatever reason, because I've got a young daughter, if I'm missing my daughter, I think that's probably the best example. There have been days where I've really wanted to be with my daughter. It might have been like a big family day, but I've had to go and work. And I think that really can be upsetting. It's easier now she's a bit older. When she was really young, like there were days where she was super upset when I was leaving, and that just broke my heart. But you've got to turn up to the wedding day and be like, hey guys, how you doing? And really bring your best self forward, where you just deep down were like, oh, you know, I wish I was with my daughter right now. So I think that's probably my answer to that question. Yeah,
I think people forget about the human side of, like, because I think the easy thing to have said there would be like something a little bit more technical. But like that's quite the opposite. It's kind of the emotion side.
Totally. And I think, you know, to diverge again, sorry, I'm giving you really long answers.
No, it's fine.
Quick fire.
Give fire.
One word answer. I'm like,
cut it out.
Tell you my life story.
I love it. I'm here for it.
When I was 7. It's one of the privileges of our job is that every week or every time I shoot a wedding, I get to see a father of the bride speech. or parents of the bride speech,
Yeah.
and I think there are always little nuggets to take from those speeches. Like every couple of weeks, I get amazing advice.
It's like a life lesson.
Yeah, admittedly not targeted at me.
You're just there crying.
Targeted at the bride, but they're like, thanks, mate.
Amazing stuff. So next one, just jump right into it. A destination wedding or a local commercial gig? You got to pick one.
Oh, mate, you're asking the hard questions here.
It gets easier. There's only one more question.
I think everyone would say this. It shoots destinations, so novelty wears off quite quickly. As amazing, weddings in the UK, you're fighting against the elements quite a bit more. I mean, we all know to make a perfect wedding film, you need a lot of kind of variables to go in your way. One of those variables being the weather. And that's as much as we always say to couples, and it is partially true. No matter what the weather, you'll have an amazing day. That is true, but sun does make our lives easier.
Yeah, it makes everyone happier.
Exactly.
It does,
and a good backdrop makes our life easier, and destination weddings, for the most part, give you that off the bat.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily always going to get that with a UK-based wedding. However, and there was also, oh God, I'm really...
there's always a but. There's always
with destination weddings, there is something lovely about the fact I always capture the welcome event and see there's something extra special about all of your loved ones traveling to a different country.
Yeah.
I do a lot of kind of American couple weddings in Italy, for example, and you've got everyone...
It's spoken about quite a lot. When you do them types of weddings, the couples speak about it, and it must feel nice. Like, it must be nice in this, like, beautiful, different, fresh location, and all your nearest and dearest are there. I don't know, that must be wicked.
And, you've seen Americans in Italy for the first time, so they've flown over. Sometimes, with some casts, it's the first time they've been to Europe. Yeah. And so they're exploring this new country together, and also they're seeing their loved ones in a different country. That's a real joy to capture.
Yeah.
So that element of destinations I really love.
Yeah.
However, you can't quite, there's nothing quite like, 2 hours in your home.
Yeah, at the same time, yeah.
So selfishly, creatively, I think destinations are lovely. Selfishly, I think UK's.
Love that answer. And what is one word that vendors overuse? Over to you.
Oh, God.
Frag out.
You're going to have to cut quite a lot of silence here. One word that vendors overuse. What's your answer to that? It might like kind of trigger a memory.
Your buzzwords that people use for
timeless.
Not so much timeless, because I feel like everyone would sort of say that, but stuff like that, I absolutely agree. Like stuff like unobtrusive, and like discreet, minimal. Like I feel like all that type of wording is overused and just a little bit.
I would agree.
A bit old school now. I feel like we need to move on, refresh.
I would agree, and I think that I'm also. I don't think I think that strategically on a wedding day. Do you know when I just react? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's it. I think that's a lot of it. But then I would argue that there are people that will not like get involved. So I think they must be thinking, I am really unobtrusive. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because they're actively not stepping in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I guess those labels exist for a reason, don't they? Because there are different styles of videography for good reason, and there are styles that will be in people's faces, and couples will love that and respond really well to that. That's not me, and so I suppose those labels work for that. But yeah, I would be the same as you, really. I can't think of one specific buzzword, but yeah, I would say. Yeah. Just a generic buzzword.
Just a buzzword, please. Submit the answer and let's move on. So we're just going to quickly now transition into the actual episode. So that's the quickfire round done. So just want to chat through with Chris about his career. It's very interesting. I think you're going to love it. So I just want to start off by saying, so you started your career as an assistant director in the film and TV world. Mm-hmm. I'm just curious to know how that experience was and whether or not that actually shaped how you approach weddings, if that makes sense.
So I was very lucky. I kind of left university and went straight into my first film job. Obviously, as everyone else does, I started off as a runner and kind of worked my way up the ranks. And in the
what was that like, being a runner?
So I'm gonna age myself a little bit here. So when I started, like, Facebook was really in its infancy, and I think that's one thing that I'm really envious of now these days is that entering the industry, there's so much content out there. Like always on my TikTok, it's like top tips to get into the film industry, and they'll talk through the departments and the roles, and there was none of that when I started. So it was really like it was peeping behind the curtain of something that I dreamed of doing since I was a kid and had no idea what it was like. So it was really exciting. Like it was just so exciting, but also there was a good amount of kind of naivety, which helped me, I think, at that age. Because I wasn't aware of, multi-million-pound productions. because it's a film crew is like, it's so cliche, but it's a bit of a family. Everyone says that. It's so like, you're up a mountain. One of the jobs I was like in Glasgow, living in a campsite with all the crew, and you're so busy working, you don't really have time for anything else. You don't have time for friends or family. So you kind of forget the fact that you're working with people that are insanely talented and are very experienced, and because it's just John, or whoever it is that you're working with. So yeah, it was. I think it's really well suited to your early 20s for me as well, because it was quite nomadic. I was all over the country, and it was just fun. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Do you think that? How do you think it shaped the weddings that you? I mean, is there any like crossovers? Do you think?
If you want me to answer the question you originally answered, okay.
I'll just bring you back round. Casually.
Okay. So there was a bit of a gap. I'll go into it later, but getting to weddings, I didn't go straight from the film industry into weddings. There was a bit of a gap doing something else for a while. So I don't think there was anything that kind of I directly took from the film industry into weddings. Also, I was an AD, so what I didn't realise at the time was I thought assistant director was quite a creative role. It's not. You're kind of essentially you're like the floor manager.
Yeah.
So you're kind of.
I imagine it's quite like more logistical in a sense.
Yeah. So you're getting the cast through hair and makeup. So you're adhering to the call sheet, and you're making sure you're kind of getting through the scenes on time and getting to the next part of the day, and kind of having those battles with more the first AD would do this, but you're having the battles with the director to move on. So it's less creative in that sense, which I wasn't necessarily aware of when I entered the industry. The most creative thing I ever did was like direct extras and be like, you're at the pub and our main actor's over there, you guys having a conversation. And some extras would be like, yeah, cool, I'm down for that. And other extras would be like, what's my motivation?
Oh, God.
To be quiet. The world of extras is a whole other conversation.
I can imagine, yeah.
But one thing that I did take was like just really thinking about composition and light. Like I would observe people. One of the best things when you start out being a runner is you get to really observe all departments, because you work across all departments. And so kind of understanding the basic elements of how lighting works. And also you would see people kind of swing the lens and change lenses and kind of understand and listening to conversations about what justified, what the motivation was behind those creative decisions.
It's almost like the mechanics, like you sort of piecing together the mechanics of how like a set and how people work together, and I think having to peep into different departments. That must be interesting.
Absolutely that. And I think that with people that kind of go straight into videography, and I think they get kind of seduced by the gear, and so they're like, sweet, a gimbal, so they don't really think about why they're moving. They're just like, oh, we just got a gimbal, so you've got to walk with it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And where I came from, when I started off in the industry, like gimbals weren't a thing. Yeah. And so you'd have to put a camera on a dolly, and so movement was motivated, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. And a lot of what was shot was static. And so I think I've definitely taken that into my career as a wedding filmmaker.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Movement has to be motivated. Yeah. And I'm still a fan of kind of still frames.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I read on your website that you switched into the wedding filmmaking world. Was it 2017?
Yeah, it was when I first
started. But then you left the sort of corporate world in, when were it?
Yeah, so
2010?
So I left the film world in 2010. And I worked as an entertainment manager for a student union, as you do, for 7 years. And then towards the end of me doing that role was when I kind of fell in love with cameras again, because I basically started to shoot content to kind of promote the gigs and club nights I was running. Yeah. And that kind of led me back into filmmaking.
Yeah, pulled you back in again. Yeah. I guess then, so going from your big productions and your sets and like there's different people, different roles. What was it like then going to weddings? Like, was that like quite a shock to the system? I know there were a big gap between it, I guess, but like you must have because you had that experience of shooting before, you must have had something to compare it to, is what I'm getting at. So was it sort of a shock thinking, Jesus, like there's quite a lot to weddings? Yeah. Was that a shock or not? Or
I think so.
Were you comfortable or?
Because I did. So before I entered weddings, I was doing kind of commercial videography before I started doing weddings. Not for long, but there was definitely a period of time where I was just doing commercial work. So I think the film world and commercial work, the main difference is just how hectic weddings are. I think they are, everyone says this, but they are really long days. Also, the pressure you get with weddings is unlike any other industry. You don't get second takes. You can't stop mid-vows to be like, hey, guys, can we do that again? Take two, please. Because
the extras weren't clapping loud enough.
Exactly. 2 extras in the back on their fucking phones.
That baby, get them out.
Exactly. I wish we could do that. So, but no, you don't get that. And I think that's where experience really pays with wedding videography. It's kind of going through, because I think, a lot of people, they might not want to admit this, but a lot of people learn through mistakes.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I
mean, that's human nature. I think you'd be daft not to admit that.
Yeah, I learn a lot through mistakes.
That's the only way I learn. Literally.
Exclusively.
My missus says that all the time. She's like, you have to make a mistake to learn. I'm like, yep.
God knows how I got through uni. A lot of failing. So I think that just that high pressure, because that high pressure scenario of knowing that you've only got one chance to capture, and also the pressure of knowing it's if I've been to a commercial shoot and mucked up the audio, we can do a reshoot. And also at the end of the day, it's a commercial shoot. It's not the end of the world. As much as you avoid everything for that to happen, there are ways around it. When I've never done this, thankfully, touch wood, but if you do muck up an element of someone's wedding day, not only can you not redo that, it's such a precious memory.
It's really sensitive. Totally respect that. So I just want to arc back a little bit, because you mentioned it previously, and it's funny enough the next question. So I just want to arc back to, you mentioned about like you've always, like your dream to get into like the film world, and like obviously now you're obviously running a successful business doing weddings and videography and filmmaking, all that fun stuff. So I just want to arc back to your childhood. Where do you think that came from? Well, how do you think you got started in?
Finally, the long-winded answer I've been waiting for. Strap yourself in, Harrison.
Strap it. I'm strapped in. I want to hear this. I can't wait. The reason I wanted to ask you this question is because I saw the video that you posted on your Instagram, which were like the camcorder stuff. Now, I'm guessing a lot of what was sort of mentioned and the sort of concept behind that is going to sort of shape your answer.
Yeah.
But I'm very similar. That's like sort of very similar to me. So I'm just interested to hear what it was like, back in the 50s.
In the 50s, on the penny farm. Video cameras weren't invented. It's paintings. It's just 24 paintings. 24 paintings a second. 25, sorry. So I think there is definitely, and an observation that I have these days. God.
I've got him. These days.
So I put my walking stick down. Is that I think that people
get your pipe out.
Exactly. I think that because everyone has a video recorder in their pockets these days, that people assume that there's far more video content of day-to-day family life, everyday life. And I'm a huge advocate for video. I think film everything, because it really pays dividends in the future, video,
100%.
More than anything else. I think what we don't do now, though, is we maybe film more, but less significant, less substantial, because Christmas Day is a really nice example. Now, on Christmas Day, we might film our kids coming downstairs, and being, it's Christmas, and seeing the presents for the first time. But then we'll just put our phones back in our pocket, which is good because, you're present in a moment. I'm all for that. However, back in the kind of 90s, early noughties, video cameras was such a novelty, and they're only pulled out at special occasions that you would hold that shot, right? So you would film the entirety of the kids opening the presents, right? And again, as much as I'm kind of an advocate of being in the moment, I do think that even if you put the video camera on the side and just let it do its thing, get your little GoPro and just get it recorded. Watching that back a week later is never going to hold any value. It'll be nice to watch, but it's not great. Sitting down, 20 years later and watching your kids open everything, all the excitement, all of the hustle bustle of everyday life, is invaluable. And for me, I was not that I wasn't a 7-year-old kid, so, with a strategy about video and you know what, Dad? You know what, Daddy? This is going to pay dividends in 20 years.
You should hold that shot for a little bit longer, Dad. Come on.
It was definitely just like I was a bit of a nerd as a kid, and I think it was the tech side of it. I was just interested in cameras, like a lot of people are, and I loved film. I remember watching Jurassic Park in the cinema the first time and being blown away. By the CGI, which bizarrely, if you watch it now, it's like, it's really shit. As a kid, it blew me away.
Yes, so similar to you, I think from an early age, I just really appreciated film. I just liked cameras. It was the same sort of situation. My dad had like a little VHS camera and would film everything. My granddad were the same. So a lot of this footage, it's not brilliant, but you look back at it, like you say, it's the age of it that you appreciate, I think. I had this discussion with Fran on an episode a few episodes before this, and I was saying I think the difference between photo and video in terms of its value is that I think video ages like fine wine, like it ages so nicely over time, whereas photos, while the grit, I think the impact of a photo is better straight away than a video. I think over time you'll still appreciate that photo, but probably no more or less than you did when you first received it, maybe. And I think with video, because you can hear it, you can see it, just like even like the nostalgia effect of just like old camcorder footage, just watching that of someone else, like when I watched your Instagram reel that you put together, the little film that you made, that like struck a chord with me, and just based on the way it looks. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
it's something that, you know, like I said, it wasn't a conscious thought as a kid. I think there were just adults around me that liked video cameras. And I had a creative mind, so I kind of, that's why I started, that's where my journey into filmmaking started.
Yeah.
Having kind of looked back upon it and like being so thankful that my family and me filmed stuff growing up, and we have this, you know, a shoebox full of DV tapes that we can watch back. I do know that as an adult. So with my own kid, I'm very conscious to like, I don't want to have, you know, like an American kind of what they call like the reality TV shows where the kids. So I'm very conscious to like not overdo
shoving
it.
the camera in the face.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, Alex, my kid's called Alex, you know. But actually, it's her now that requests me. She's like, "Daddy, film this." I'm like, "Oh, do I have to?"
That must be. Do I have to?
I'm not working, mate. You're gonna pay me because I charge a lot.
Can you afford me? Get out.
Yeah, take this out your inheritance. So yeah, I'm very conscious of that, and I am the annoying dad. And like I get home with my mates, like if I'm on holiday with friends or whatever, I'll be the one with the camera. And they always say to me in the moment, like, just put it down and have fun. But I'm like, you'll thank me for this.
You better do.
And they do.
They do come around.
Right. So yeah, I'm very careful to manage it, so it's not like I'm present in the moment. But I do think it's really important to record these moments of life, because not to get too morbid, but especially when you lose people, it's so nice to have. To have, you know, there's something that video, hearing people's voices, you know, that kind of thing.
It's like the laughing and the reactions, isn't it? That all like comes into it. Okay, so slight little sidestep into something a little bit less morbid. I just want to ask you. So I've got a bit of I don't know if I've spoke about this to you before. Okay. So I want to ask you about the name Toast Films. I think, have we spoke about this? I think we have had a discussion, or someone's mentioned this to me, because you mean as in a cheers, a toast.
Yeah. We did have this. I know you remember, because we went to Rue's conference. We spoke about it there. I think.
So I thought that's quite an unusual name, because as a northerner, I instantly think of just like you're 50-50, you know, just a bit of toast, you know, toast and butter.
If you weren't aware that you're northern, you just gave it away. You're 50-50.
But yeah, so I for a long time I was like, Toast Films, like quite a brave name. And it's only that coda that I realised that it was like Toast Cheers.
I think, to be perfectly honest with you, it was just my naivety about the wedding world. So like when I started weddings, I'd only been to a few really, like a few mates' weddings. And I just thought, like, I didn't necessarily realise that toast was an Americanized kind of term. I just thought people, you know, have a toast.
Have a toast.
I mean, obviously I grew up in England. I should know that we say cheers, not toast. I am an idiot.
Cheers Films.
But that was, honest to God, the mindset. I was very conscious that I didn't want to attach my name, because I started off like Chris Pavey Films, but I lasted all of 6 months before I rebranded, because I was very conscious, because of the commercial work that would go into, that I wanted two very separate entities. I didn't want the two to mix. So I just had to come up with a name, and you know what it's like, you know, going through various kind of I didn't want it to sound overly cheesy. I hope Toast doesn't, I don't know. And I just landed on Toast, and it was literally, I was thinking kind of cheers, toast.
Makes sense.
Everyone thinks it's the bread, which completely doesn't go against most people that I speak to. It's like, and it doesn't align up to what I'm trying to build with
I'm just trying to like picture like what couples must think. Like,
well, they meet me and it quickly makes sense. Like, okay,
you just answer the Zoom call with the toast.
I'm just dribbling all the cameras. Like, it makes sense. He's an idiot. He's a babbling fool. That's
Oh God!
And they booked me out of pity then.
Yeah,
So I play into it now. I'm like,
yeah. Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
You could really easily just rebrand if you wanted to like, I don't just like advertise just like toast logos. That'd
I
be
could,
great.
Yeah. Well, there's commercial companies as well.
Oh,
I think
dear.
there's one in Dubai randomly, and there's a few commercial companies that are branded as toast, and they just it's just a bit of a novelty
thing. Yeah.
and they mean the bread toast.
Yeah.
But there is a wedding. There's actually, when I first started out, there's an American wedding videographers called Toast Wedding Films, and they reached out to me on Instagram very early on, and it makes way more sense for them to be called Toast because they're in America.
Yeah, fair enough. What do you love most about weddings?
So it's a real cliched answer, but I think it's being involved in that kind of contagious happiness, but also like being in the inner circle in a weird way. I think like when you get to go off with a couple and it's just you, the couple, and the photographer.
Yeah,
there's something quite intimate about that, isn't there? Which their nearest and dearest, their family, their ultimate loved ones, don't get to necessarily have that experience, and we do. And it's a pleasure to kind of go away with them and have a little kind of talk about their day. And so I guess that's my honest answer. I'm
just curious because like you said, you've introduced like the camcorder stuff. Are you using Super 8? Is that right?
Again, I'm really kind of I don't want to kind of follow the trends too much.
This is it, yeah.
And there's an actual reason for me to shoot there's a reason that I like to shoot camcorder stuff that we can talk about later if you want. I
think talk about it now, because I'm about to ask you about it anyway. So
I am starting to shoot Super 8, but less. So it's kind of more as a result of couples requesting it rather than being thing. But the camcorder stuff, I think for me. So actually, kind of two things happened at once. One thing was I had a commercial job that I had to pitch a creative idea for, and I thought about using camcorders for that. But the reason I thought about using camcorders is that my nana had passed away, and I was going through my granddad's cupboards, and they had stacks and stacks and stacks of VHS tapes from going back to what I said before, the family videos, all of which he hadn't watched because he's getting on a little bit himself, and it's just he didn't have a VHS player anymore. So I kind of did some research. This was quite a while ago now, and found like a little device where I could digitalize the VHS tapes to digital. So I bought that kit. I was processing all of this footage, and I was like sending my brothers WhatsApp videos like, look at this, like all throughout doing it, because you have to watch it back in real time when you're transcoding all of it. And I was like, this is just gold dust. Like this, there is something about this footage, which obviously is instantly nostalgic just by the aesthetic of it, but just the vulnerability and the honesty of that kind of home shot, truly home shot.
Yeah,
videos.
true. Yeah.
And I'm like, it translated really well to a commercial project that I was pitching for. So I went on eBay and bought some camcorders for this commercial project. Yeah. And then I thought this would actually translate really well to weddings.
To weddings, yeah.
And the main reason for me and how I use them is I will kind of, when I talk to couples and they express that they kind of want to bring the camcorders along, I always say to them, like, during our pre-wedding chat, that for me the magic source is when guests take control of them. Yeah. And this is how I like to use them personally. I feel like like a wedding video is always going to be like a home video, isn't it? That's essentially what it is.
It is, yeah.
But we're strangers, so we have to film it from a distance. Yeah. And I think that when you have camcorders and you hand them to a guest, people interact with that camera far differently to how they interact with us, because they're kind of, and I encourage kind of whoever's got the camcorder, I encourage them to go up to guests and kind of, get them to cheers to camera, toast to camera, and
branding, get it in there.
Exactly, and wave and kind of react to the camera, essentially. Yeah, because I think for two reasons, I think that cuts really nicely with my
between the two different types. Yeah, I agree.
More observational footage, but equally, it's footage that I'm never going to be able to obtain because I'm a stranger. And if I went up to someone who is a stranger with a video camera and was like, "All right, mate," like going to react in a different way. And they're just fun to shoot with. Yeah. So I think, for me, it just adds another element to wedding film. So not every couple opts for it. Like it's an optional choice. Yeah. But I love it when people go for it because it just adds an element to the films.
My first ever camera that I had, it's like a little digital camera. But I've started using that at weddings, and I think, like you say, handing it to guests, getting that footage. You're never going to be able to get that, like you said. So it's nice having that other perspective, and it's just interesting, I think, to chuck in, like you said, like alongside the other stuff with the nicely clean shot footage, cut into like more classic home style video. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's like I feel like it's a no-brainer. I'm surprised people haven't done it before. You know,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
I mean, it feels like a bit of a cheat code in a way because you're almost getting a 3-second shoot.
Yeah.
Oh, mate, can you film?
Can you just film?
Yeah,
the
I'm not
ceremony
gonna
and the speech.
pay
yeah.
you,
yeah.
but here's a job for the day. But I always.
But people love it. From my experience,
Yeah.
people actually enjoy it. So I feel like if you can add a bit of an excitement, and I always say to them, "There's no pressure.
Yeah.
There's no pressure with it. Just get a few shots,
I'm exactly
whatever."
the same.
You know,
I always say, don't treat this like a job because
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
you know how bridesmaids are so eager to kind of have a role.
Yeah, have a role,
and
yeah.
that sometimes it can get in the way of them having a nice day because they're so eager to be helpful.
Yeah.
I always say, like, please don't treat this like a job. The second you get bored of it, pull it down, give it to someone else. But you know, if you're having fun with it, just roll with it. But just please remember to make it to the venue with you. Otherwise,
yeah.
So yeah, I'm very, very, very keen to express it. And I also say this on couple calls because I'm like, you can, if you want, we can bring someone along to shoot it, but I just don't think you're going to get the value out of it.
Yeah,
as you will, as
100%.
compared to giving it to a guest. Because for the pure reason, for me, it doesn't make sense because if I had a camcorder and I was shooting with it or someone else was shooting, that's going to be observational footage again because we're going to shoot it from a distance.
Yeah.
It doesn't cut then against.
Yeah,
It just seems like a bad quality version of what
yeah.
I'm shooting.
Yeah.
So you got to get into the thick of it with those cameras.
Whereabouts do you use that then, just out of interest, in the day? Do you hand it out in the morning and then pick it up at night, or do you take it back and sort of give it to people at certain points of the day?
In the morning, so I typically give one to the bridal party and one to the groom's party. Obviously, I brief them, make sure you take it with you to the ceremony. And if that's an issue, for whatever reason, I will take it back off them after prep. But typically what happens is they'll have it and they love it. Like I've literally had I shot a wedding on Thursday and I was packing up at like 10:30 p.m. and the bridesmaid's like, have you got a camera? And I'm like, go now, mate. So I have to wrestle it off them. But it typically happens that either during the wedding breakfast because they are older cameras. So it's somewhat pointless having them during the nighttime activities because the footage is going to look awful.
Yeah.
So normally during the wedding breakfast, it's a good opportunity for me to go and scan the tables, find where they are, grab them. But it happens more often than not that whoever's been filming with it will come back up to me and request it back.
Yeah, like I said, so I've only introduced it and I've only used it a couple of times. So it's, for me, I was sort of doing what you've just said there. I didn't use it at night and I just used it in the day and I was just handing it out at certain points of the day where I thought, that might be an interesting perspective.
I think it does have to suit, like, I'm really keen for it not to become a gimmick. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to be like the VHS video.
Yeah.
So I'm very,
I feel like
very
that. I
keen.
feel like that with the Super 8 though. I feel like Super 8 were around for maybe a few years, and then I feel like it's got to the point now where Super 8's like kind of like, you kind of got to be seen to do it, to be offering it and doing it. Like it's become, I feel a little bit gimmicky.
But I just don't want to do it in every film. And in fact, I've got a wedding in Tuscany in mid-May. And the bride got in touch saying, we really want the camcorders, but we don't want it to be in our film because we think it'd be lovely to have actually just as a separate film, just VHS kind of guest.
That's a nice idea,
but not blended into the main film. And I'm like, absolutely, 100%, because I'm really keen not to make it, like, I will suggest it if it fits the wedding. Yeah. It's not just like bring it out
just for the
everywhere.
sake of it.
For some weddings, it just won't
don't need it.
fit the aesthetic. You know?
Yeah. I think one of the weddings I shot with it, the reason why I shot, so it was actually the couple booked. I've spoken about this, I think, before on an episode, but I'll briefly go over it again. So the couple booked me about a year ago before the wedding, and the bride reached out and mentioned that basically she really wanted a videographer because it was so special to her, and that basically her mother had passed away when she was like 7 years old. She really valued video because of what we've kind of been chatting about, like the old sort of camcorder footage. Mm-hmm. That's what she's got video-wise of her mum, because she died when she was 7. Like, I imagine it would have been sort of mid-2000s, so around that time, as I guess. So I said to her, I'd seen the sort of trend of using camcorder footage, and I just thought, I've got my camcorder, but I just don't. Frankly, I don't want to use it. I don't think it looks as good. I don't think there's a purpose. And then when she reached out and said that, I said, why don't we introduce the camcorder stuff as a little nod to your mum? Because obviously her mum wouldn't be there. So I said it's a way of you looking back at the wedding in a way that makes sense to her. Like it's a little nod to her mum. And it was a big conversation on the day, as you can imagine. Like people were speaking about it in the speeches, and I just feel like it was a nice, easy, subtle way to introduce it. And like you say, the bridesmaids and stuff, they were all over it. They loved it. So
I think, like, for me, the key thing is everything that I do, and it sounds really pretentious, so forgive me, but I want things to be motivated.
This is it. I agree. I totally agree. Yeah, because like I said, things can quickly become like the Super 8. I feel like if you're just using it all the time, and it just becomes another trend. It's another thing that's just going to get sort of mushed into a film, and that's what you do at weddings. I don't know, like, what I'm trying to compare it to, but I feel like every videographer now has got a drone. Obviously, it's like, not saying that's a bad thing, but you know what I'm trying to say. Like, it's becoming like a bit of, Or you've got to have a Super 8, or you've got to have a camcorder, and it's like, Christ, how much?
Do you see camcorders becoming, in a weird way, the new drones? So when drones first became accessible in the market, and you watch people's wedding films, and no, I'm guilty of this, there would be so many drone shots just because, that's what couples wanted at that time. It was just like, do you have a drone when they booked you? And so you just made sure that, but it doesn't make a huge amount of sense to just have loads of like a drone is an establishing shot. That's how I use it.
Yeah.
Or to kind of go from one scene to the next, transition. There has to be a reason to use it. And it's the same with camcorders. Yeah, it looks cool, but like when I cut to it, I really like to think that there's a reason that I'm cutting to it. It kind of makes sense within the edit. It's not just like, it looks cool, let's throw this shot in.
How much planning are you doing then? So you're saying like, you're quite motivated in terms of the shooting and the editing. How motivated are you in terms of like, on a wedding day, have you got like systems in place that's like, I do this, I do that?
Not a huge amount. I think I'm very kind of the way that I like to work.
A bit looser.
I respond well in chaos. I think that's the best answer.
That's the title sorted.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a clip.
I think that I'm quite good at just trusting my instincts and kind of reacting to whatever's happening.
Fair enough.
I think if I spot something at the corner of my eye and there's a reason as to why that might look good in a particular, shooting it in a particular way, I'll just go for it.
Yeah.
I think the second, and plans exist for a reason. I think when you're kind of working at an event, which needs a level of planning, you've got to do it, right? Yeah. But I also think that if you're too rigid with a plan, it can actually take away from some of that spontaneity, which is where I think the magic happens. It's really hard to like spread yourself too thin because I think these days there's such a demand for kind of mixed media. So, gimbal shots, handheld shots, camcorder shots, dragging your shutter, all this kind of stuff that you can actually neglect what you're there to do because you're so worried. And I like to skate a balance between creativity and coverage. I like to kind of have a nice happy medium. Yeah. However, that being said, you still got to respect the coverage. So if you're so obsessed with creativity and you miss a moment,
that's a really interesting point. I think you can get too carried away, can't you, in the creativity of it all?
Or just shooting for reels. You know what I mean? People that are just like, I want to make a really sick reel, and they know the ingredients to make a really good reel means that you have to. By the way, people don't say sick anymore, do they?
I do, mate.
Is that a way to age?
Am I getting old then as well?
Sick real man. Yeah.
Sick real. What would they say?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
Just do the dead emoji, wouldn't they?
Dead emoji. I don't know.
I'm old, mate. It's my biggest fear is not understanding terminology or technology. I'm getting there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that if you're shooting for a reel, and it is part of what we do, we have to market.
Yeah.
The main focus has to be on your clients.
Yeah.
And getting the best possible film for them.
What is your gear? What gear do you use? Move on. Boring.
So I shoot on Sony's. So I have two setups for commercial and weddings. So for my weddings, I shoot primarily on Sony's. So I have an FX3, an A7S3, and what they called the kind of vlog cameras, the EZ.
Yeah, I know what you mean. The littler ones. Are they the ones that have a little bit of a crop on them?
Yeah. So I picked one of those up just as a C cam because I was using.
They are good though. Them.
Yeah,
they are good.
I was using an A7 III, but I was just having too many issues with it, so I picked up one of these cameras. And yeah, it's great. And I use this season. I've changed. So I was always a bit of a prime snob.
Like me.
This season I've changed. So I've gone to a zoom.
Get out.
Yeah,
that's the end of this podcast.
So I picked up one of the F2 Sony G Master zooms.
Yeah. So how are you finding it?
Yeah, mate, I'm loving it. The freedom it offers.
I bet.
It's incredible. Because I also used to kind of religiously shoot on a monopod, and I'm kind of navigating more towards handheld. Just
fair
because
enough.
The inbuilt stabilization is so good.
Yeah.
And I feel like it just frees you up to kind of get the shots that you need. And I'm also kind of moving more towards less slow motion, a lot more kind of normal speed content. And I think that that kind of lends itself really nicely to kind of more handheld way of shooting. So I have that, and then I have a couple of G Master Primes. I've got a 35 and a 24 as well. So I kind of go between those three.
Yeah, because for years and years, I was very much in. I'm in the prime. I'm still in the prime snobbery section.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think my issue with the zoom is I don't want to. I actually have said before, I like, weirdly, going back to the camera geek thing, I like changing lenses. I like purposely, like we've said before, like you've just said, purposely shooting, thinking, right, I'm shooting on an 85, or I'm shooting on a 135, or I'm going to shoot on a 24. Yeah. Like, I love changing lenses. I enjoy it. Because I get a bit of a buzz thinking, for this section of the day, I visualize it like this.
Yeah, go back to motivation. It's motivated.
Yeah,
you're picking a lens for a reason.
Yeah, and I feel like with zooms, although it gives you that freedom instantly just to zoom in and out.
Yeah.
My worry is that if you're running and gunning style in it,
Yeah.
if you've got a 50 on, you're shooting 50. You've got no choice. You have to adapt and move in and out, and that's sort of the deal. Whereas with a zoom, I don't want to sort of be shooting at like, 47mm. I want to be shooting at 50. I don't want to be at a weird focal length. Do you know what I mean? Whether or not I'm just looking into that in a weird way, like I feel like it'll just look the more range you have, I feel like that'll look weirder.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Just shooting at like a 32, for example. Like that's just or a 30. Like I don't know. I feel that's a bit odd. And maybe like that won't even tell. You won't be able to tell in the footage maybe, but like I would, and I'd be like, oh, this looks a bit weird.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean, because on my commercial side of things,
it's a bit geeky, but yeah.
No, I see where you're coming from. And I completely agree in many respects. And to the fact that my commercial work is all primes. Like I have a set of primes that I use for commercial work, and I don't differ from that. I just think with weddings, it's going back to that kind of
being adaptable,
creativity versus coverage thing. And I think that because I, for the most part, 95% of the time I shoot by myself, and it's just those moments you lose kind of going into your bag, and it might be like, also I'm more like when I go on a couple shoot, I don't want to have a sling bag full of lenses. I want to be able to make quick, because I also want to work with photographer, and I don't want to be that. I don't want to hold up what they're doing or make the couple feel unnecessarily awkward because let's hold it a second and and for me, I just think it allows me to be more flexible in those moments.
A little bit quicker.
I think that I'm not crazy with this. What I found is I'm tending to stick to the focal lengths that I'm used to. So I'm either shooting, a 35 or going up to the 70 because I used to be 35, 70, 75?
75, yeah.
So I find myself kind of shooting at the focal lengths I'm used to. Anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm not really kind of, not crash zoom in or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's just the flexibility to go from a 35 to a 70 really quickly. I don't really shoot wide that often, but you do have the possibility to go wider if the shot kind of needs it. But also just the fact that it's an f2, and I think that's what held me back for so long, because 2.8 just felt a little bit too kind of high up the f-stops for me. Each their own. I guess that's the one thing that you always kind of think about with a bit of experience. There are so many ways to do the same job. You just got to find what's comfortable for you.
I think this is the important thing, and people can often compare too much. Like, if you start doing a lot of second shooting, for example, you see how someone else is shooting, you think, oh, am I doing it wrong then? Like, you start questioning.
You
thank you, I'm going to go. But yeah, you do, don't you? You start thinking, oh, is this wrong? Like, should I be doing that instead? And I think it's easy to quickly compare, and you think, oh no, I should be doing that. But
100%.
Yeah.
I think this industry is full of, and it just being the very nature of being a creative is quite often you'll look over the fence and look at other people's work. And I can't remember the last time I produced a bit of work. I was like, I love that. Generally, I'm very self-critical of my own work.
Yeah.
Whereas everyone else's work is incredible. So it's hard not to kind of go down that rabbit hole and think, oh, what are they shooting on? And, it's human nature.
It's strange. It's a strange one. I feel like I'm the same. I'm so self-critical of myself. But I think it's when you see it a lot as well. When you're in the business and you see it all the time, I think it's like anything. Not comparing us to this. This is a stupid example, but like a brain surgeon, they'll just walk in. You know what I mean? They'll do it.
Stretching, but I'll go with it.
Let's just go with it. It's like a brain surgeon or any type of surgeon. They're so used to doing what they're doing. There's some sort of like calm. They're not impressed by it. It's not like a big deal.
Yeah.
And I think that's almost the same.
I think because I have friends that have been kind of in a role for 20 years for one company, and they go for interviews for another job and they get offered a 20 grand pay rise, and it blows their mind. I'm like, well, you've neglected to think that there's so much kind of knowledge in your brain that you've built up over the last 20 years of experience
That's another great point. Yeah.
But you don't necessarily realize the value of that experience until you're in a different context.
Yep. Yeah.
And I think that translates. That's probably a better example than a brain surgeon.
We are surrounded by, like, there's a great bunch of us that egg each other on, which is great. But at the same time, it's almost like a little bit of I wouldn't say competition, but it's it's hard to not compare to those other people. You're trying to spur each other on. You're trying to constantly push each other to do better and better. But then you'll see that they're doing something like, oh shit, I need to keep up with that person, or I need to add this, or I need to do that. So yeah,
there's
I totally
so many nuances to it, aren't there? Because equally we don't have colleagues. So normally, if you had a bad day in the office, you would have a moan, around the water cooler saying, "Oh, this is I've got this client I'm dealing with every night." Whatever it is, you can vent to somebody, and they would get you. And I think that we're trying to do our best work, but then there are other elements to it. So creatively, we're kind of critiquing ourselves, but then also behind the scenes, we might be worrying that our bookings are down. We've got all of this whirling around in our brain, but we don't necessarily have someone to talk to. So I think community is huge.
It's massive.
So find your people, and
massive.
kind of lean upon them, because they will be the only other people that get it. And transparency, I think, is key, and being honest with other people to kind of help you navigate those tougher moments.
Yeah, definitely. I could sit and chat about that for ages, but I'm really interested to dive into going more into the corporate and commercial stuff that you do. So what type of corporate and commercial projects have you worked on? Are you allowed to speak? Are you allowed to mention it?
Yeah, of course.
What have you done? Any sort of show off? Feel free to show off. What have you done?
What haven't I done? So yeah, I've been doing like I said, I started the commercial stuff before I did the weddings. It started off kind of quite low key, and it still is to an extent. I think that I'm in a really nice position now where I get to work on a hybrid of kind of smaller budget solo shooter projects, but then I get to be part of also bigger budget, crew things, which I...
See, the reason I'm bringing this up is because, selfishly, I'm super interested in all this. I would love to introduce more of this into my life and my work.
I think a lot of people find their way into it through a niche. I think that seems to be the typical advice, and I certainly did. My niche was education. I think that I had a background of working. When I worked at the SU, I kind of... ultimately, I was running club nights, but I was also working with the marketing department to kind of promote those club nights. Right. Because it was an SU, it was connected to university, so I was talking to the university team, marketing department about various things that we were putting on. And that kind of started. And then when I started doing video content to promote the nights that I was running, it kind of caught the attention of the marketing department of the university, and they were like, we've seen what you do, is there any chance you could do some stuff for us? And that's kind of really how it started for me, was kind of working with universities and student unions, to be honest, when I first started, which was a really kind of good place to start, but they don't necessarily have the budget to kind of to pay me the money that I demand. So I've been really lucky. I mean, it's really vast and varied what I do. I still work a lot with universities, which I find fun, because universities inherently have a younger audience, and I find kind of making up content for younger audiences is fun. So
if you plan on getting married, by the way, just adding cards out.
Exactly. There you go. I can't cross the two companies. It's very very strict. I don't do that for multiple reasons.
But if someone asked you then, so how does that work? Is it just like a choice that you don't want to?
They're just two separate audiences. So they're entirely, weddings are B2C, they're business to consumer. When I work with commercial work, it's business to business. So they are two entirely separate audiences. And I don't know, I just have a theory that it maybe devalues the brand ever so slightly on the commercial side. And also, like with the weddings, it's very personal. I want them to know that they're dealing with me. And I don't have a team of people, it's me. And so I push heavily on that. But
I guess that's a really good point to make.
Commercial,
actually.
They don't. If it's almost with the kind of companies that I want to be working with and do work with, kind of if they know it's just me, it's less appealing than going to an agency that has. So my approach has been to crew up for jobs. So if I have bigger budget jobs, there's a kind of a network of freelancers that I will draw upon, and I'll crew up for those jobs. And I'm transparent with my clients that it's a smaller agency. But I just think they're entirely separate audiences. The content is entirely different, so it doesn't benefit me in any way to cross over. If that makes sense.
What would be some of your tips if a videographer wanted to move into doing more of that kind of work? Because we were chatting about it off camera. I know you were saying that it used to be, I think arguably probably a little bit easier, maybe, a handful to like 10 years ago probably than it is today, would you say?
Yeah, there's definitely more talent in the industry. There are a lot less barriers to entry. So essentially kit is way more affordable nowadays than it used to be. So people can kind of, buy a couple of mirrorless cameras, spend $6,000, get a couple of LED light panels and off they go. Whereas back in the day it was a significantly, a bigger investment.
Yeah.
But that being said, a kind of because of that, there is more content out there now because
There's more demand, I guess.
Yeah, 20 years ago, if you invested in a video project, that would be your showpiece that you would have sat on your website for 5 years because you invested so heavily in it. Now, video content exists as part of a social campaign for a week and then it's dead.
It's dead.
So there's counters to that argument. But my advice, going back to what I said earlier, is to find a niche. Kind of do something and do it well and go from there.
I think that's a good rule for anything that you were getting into, isn't it? Like if you've got a genuine drive and passion for something, then that's something that can't be necessarily learnt or taught.
Yeah.
If you've got that drive within you that you want to do something, then I guess that's like just follow that.
Because with universities, that was my in, and universities are very unique setups, and I think it helped to know that world because I spoke their language when I was coming in to kind of pitch ideas to them.
Yeah.
But equally, so I had a lot of experience in that sector, but also I was interested in it primarily because it was a young audience. So you got to kind of do fun, creative stuff with the edits. So that was my in. And once you've got, a decent portfolio from there, what I found, and I've been very lucky, I suppose, is a job will lead to a job. So either somebody will see a bit of work that you've done and they'll be like, oh, who shot this for you? Or a member of staff will move on to another company and they will then bring you over there and it just organically grows.
Yeah.
I've been very lucky in my career that I haven't really had to put a huge amount of money into marketing to kind of get my name out there. It's been fairly organic, and I realise that's a really privileged position to be in.
What's the split, do you think, between weddings and the commercial?
It's probably about 50-50 if I'm
Is
honest.
it? Yeah.
I mean, obviously weddings are somewhat seasonal, so but then to counter that, with commercial shoots, often people prefer to shoot in the summer months
because it looks prettier.
There's more daylight. Essentially, you have to wrap by 3 p.m. if you're shooting externals in the winter months because you've lost daylight.
What's more tougher to deal with, like business sort of clients or like couples? Like what's a tougher experience?
Business clients, 100%.
Yeah,
I think purely for amendments.
Yeah. So the post-production side of it.
I think that when you send a commercial job off for review, it is the expectation.
Would you say that it feels, because my argument to that is, does it feel less personal? I guess when you're doing a wedding, I feel like you put more of your own sort of, just from like my side of things. When I'm building a wedding film, I'm trying to. I want to obviously put what's important to the couple into the film, i.e., like what's being said, the speeches, the story, what music, all that stuff. But generally, it's kind of like finding a story, then finding like what I resonate with, and then hopefully that'll like sort of like cross over into what they resonate with on the day. So I feel like if they ever come back and say, oh, we didn't like that feels like a real like personal attack. You're like, Jesus, I've done a shit job, that's it, I'm quitting, I'm never doing this again. But I guess with like more the corporate business things, because it's to be expected, you kind of know they're going to say something.
Yeah.
Is it kind of like a bit like,
it's
bugger
them? It depends. I mean, I completely agree with you on the wedding side. If you ever get anything that even kind of skirts on being somewhat negative, it is soul destroying, and you just want to do everything you can to fix that.
Yeah.
On the commercial side, you're right, it is expected, but it's no less. It's frustrating, I guess.
Frustrating,
because I guess the best clients are the ones that I always see it as you hire me as a video expert, so I know in terms of video strategy what the best way of shooting a certain and editing a certain project is. Yeah, I think a client where their feedback for me really is valuable is where they've got their brand hat on and they're like, this is how we want our brand to be positioned, so we wouldn't necessarily say or do this. That for me is really valuable feedback that I always take on board. However, if it's really pernickety and if it's like
they have their own vision,
and you get that a lot, there's always a Spielberg in a marketing office.
That's brilliant.
There's always somebody who thinks did a film degree or whatever it is, or likes film.
Scorsese, I think.
And they want, and it's just, I always say when I onboard a new client that for me, when we talk through the timeline of what they expect and when they want their deliverables, I always say that ensure that you have one creative you have one person that you filter all creative feedback through. Because creative feedback is so subjective.
It is.
So one person might love a shot, another person might hate it. And if you have edit by committee, which has happened, that is when the whole thing gets torn to shreds.
Yeah.
But there's been projects that have gone through, like I've got to like around 23 of amendments, and it's like, this is just
23.
There's been some projects which have just gone on forever.
That's mental.
And there's different flavours to that. There's just the expectation is just not there. Some people sometimes, when they give you their budget, you have to kind of manage their expectations, and it's like, well,
Yeah.
you know, the reference video you sent through to me, I need to make you aware that that was shot by X agency with X budget. The budget that you've revealed that you have to play with on this is, you know, a tenth of that. So with that, you have to have. We can't bring.
I'll be bringing out the camcorders for this one.
Yeah, exactly. See these cameras?
Yeah, they're really good for this type of budget. So just help me visualize then, because as you've been chatting there, like what type of actual, what are you actually making? Like, is it ads? Like, is it like what type of content? Just help me like visualize it.
The vast majority of stuff that I make is destined to go on the internet, so it's kind of short form content, not reels, or it's typically kind of 1 minute to 2 minute videos.
Yeah.
Which are designed to be consumed online.
Yeah.
And there is a section of the work that I do which is either like cinema advertisement or TV advertisement, and that's as far as it's gone so far. And those kind of cinema TV ads, so that's like the NFU example. There's I did one for Dunlop. There's been a few kind of university cinema ads that I've been part of. That's where you kind of bring in the bigger crew.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, where I find a lot of creative fulfillment, being part of the bigger crew. And that's really kind of, in terms of business strategy, that's why I'm really aiming to develop my commercial side of the business, is moving more into that arena.
I love that balance that you have. Yeah. And I think at the minute, I'm just, and this sounds a bit wanky, but like as a creative, I feel very static at the minute. I feel like I'm not pushing creatively, and I'm not scratching that itch. I want to get into
There's several things I can say about that. I think like the first thing to say, in my experience, I think documentary filmmaking is the closest to wedding filmmaking in terms of the technicalities of
I think it
the
is,
job.
Yeah.
Run and gun, chaotic.
Yeah.
It's very close to wedding filmmaking in a sense.
But I feel like obviously you have obviously the decision to be creative. You can light it how you want. All that side of it. Like the amount of people I'm subscribed to on YouTube that I just watch like lighting breakdowns, and I love getting like stuck into more creatively where I have my input into it. Yeah. Whereas a wedding, you edit in the way that you want, but like generally they have the beats of the day. It's the same rundown. Every wedding, if you've done a destination, you've probably done most destinations. They kind of follow a formula. Same as a UK wedding, they kind of follow a formula. Once you've done like, you know, a Jewish wedding or an Asian wedding or like anything else, like I feel like there are these pockets of like different creativity within the industry. But once you've kind of checked it all off, it's like, again, I'm going to repeat myself, but it's like you just get this creative itch I want to scratch. You know?
I think that wedding filmmaking is a really good education to kind of cross over into documentary. You know, the interviews in documentaries are lit. Other than that, you're using natural light, which is weddings. Everything is natural light. Yeah. But also to pick up on your point about that itch. What did you say? Getting into a bit of a creative rut. I think it's really, really important to do passion projects, because if you're always working for a client, it somewhat becomes repetitive and boring, right? Because you're creating edits for the client. And I think that is actually one thing that wedding filmmaking does have over commercial, because wedding filmmaking, for the most part, clients are buying into your vision and your eye and the way that you edit. So you're trusted to just kind of, you do your thing. Yeah. So you do kind of get an element of that satisfaction there, but you still are creating an edit for a couple. And so you have to fit within certain molds.
Yeah, you've got to be in a box really.
And if you do a purely solo funded documentary, you know, so it's not attached to a studio or anything, it's just all you can do whatever the hell you want. Really kind of, it's carte blanche, isn't it? You can tell your own story in your own way and find your own voice when it comes to that style of filmmaking.
100%.
And anyway, we've got the kit. We've got a lot of wedding filmmakers. One thing I'm envious, the only thing I don't like about doing both is that I look at some people that just shoot weddings and, you know, they have 6 months of downtime. And I don't necessarily have that. And I'm not necessarily complaining, because I'm very lucky to do the commercial stuff. But if I had that downtime, 100%, you know, I'd be trying to find a story to tell. And there's so many interesting stories out there.
What's your favourite type of like commercial project to shoot?
Like I said, I still do a lot of work, so I don't want to kind of lie and say that I'm always doing kind of big budget, because I'm not. A lot of what I do is just me. Just, you know, shooting case studies or testimonials or that kind of stuff. but I definitely find the bigger project ones where you can kind of conceptualize a story and you can kind of storyboard it out, and you bring in a crew and you do recce's and you kind of work out how you're going to spend an hour. I did a shoot last year where we spent 2 hours like kind of working out how we're going to shoot a top-down shot of a desk, you know, and we were lighting it and all. And
that to me, that I'm like, that sounds wicked.
Oh, it was I
want to get stuck into that.
Yeah, like I said, it emulates what I did in the film world to some extent, but much in the film world, because you're a very, very, very small part of a huge machine.
Yeah.
And everyone has a very defined role. Yeah. You're not going to be able to get stuck in. And of course, you're working on things that, you know, it has a lot more money attached to it. It's got, you know, a star attached to it. So in that way, it's a lot cooler than doing a kind of a shoot where you've got 6 members of crew. But I do find it more fulfilling being able to be fully involved in all aspects of the process, rather than just my one very defined role in a much bigger
and
scale.
That's probably what's changed over the, like, since you started until now. I feel like this new term of videographer, this, like, it's like a new breed of, like, a filmmaker. Like you said before, it's not easy, but I don't want to say easy, but it's more affordable to buy cameras, buy the gear you need, and you can go out and actually do it yourself with, like, pretty much industry standard kit. Yeah. Like, you can do that yourself and you have the full choice to do it. Whereas maybe back in sort of like 20 years ago, 20 to 30 years ago, there wasn't that choice at all.
100%.
Like, if you weren't willing to work your way up, you were probably stuck in that bottom realm of just being the you know, the piece in the puzzle. Yeah, so I'm just curious how, because you seem to really balance your true personality within the world of weddings.
Thanks,
it's something that I struggle with. I feel like, and this is me being genuine, like, I feel like I can't fully let on that, like, I like to joke around and muck around sometimes. If you're asking people to buy into you as this business and this brand that's like a more, you know, you're charging X amount, and you've got to be seen to be more, ooh, I'm a bit more, you know. I even sometimes go on Zoom calls and I really try to hide that I'm a northerner and I'm from Rotherham, like, and I've got a strong, thick northern accent. Yeah. Because that, for a long time, held me back in the industry, and people were saying, don't worry about it. Like, honestly, just, like, it's not a thing. But from my experience and my childhood growing up, it almost certainly is a thing. Yeah. That's why you don't see many northerners on telly and stuff, because they just don't want to listen to him. Yeah. But then it says something like the most friendly accent or something. Most trustable accent is the Yorkshire.
Most call centres are based in Newcastle and Darlington, because, like, that voice is universally, in the UK, deemed as the most friendly accent.
Yeah, but going back to what I said, like, how you seem to do it, balance it really well.
Yeah. So firstly, it's not my observation of you. I think you do a really good job at kind of injecting who you are, as well as kind of having your business hat on. So,
thank you. Appreciate it.
I like I said, going back to what I was talking about earlier on, when I started off in the industry, I really struggled, and I did what a lot of people did, which is just emulate what was already out there. Yeah. And it just, you know, slow-mo, super romantic. And I'm a unique person in many ways, because I'm quite a deep thinker. I'm quite a sentimental person, but I also am known within my group of friends as the dick of the group, to be honest. Yeah. I couldn't think of a better word. Just
like moron. Prattling around.
Yeah. I'm just always, like, just being stupid and just being stupid. And
I really resonate with that, because that's me. That is me. Yeah. Like, there's parts of me that's like, this is getting a bit deep, but there's parts of me that's like, you know, if I've had a few drinks, I'll have a really serious, deep chat with you. Yeah. But you better believe that, like, the next morning I'll be taking the piss out of you, and that is just me.
But that's the beauty of life, right? And I think the difficult thing about the business side of things is that, you know, for me, taking a mick out of somebody is a sign of endearment. That's not the wrong word. Endearment?
Affection. We'll
affection. Yeah.
But I agree. Like, sometimes that's like, especially I think being British and then especially on top of that being like a northerner, that is very much the language that we speak. It is. That's like, you know, if we say, oh, you dickhead, it's like, we're not calling you a dickhead. Like, maybe Americans would think, oh, fucking hell, that's a bit offensive. Yeah. But I don't know. I feel like it's
so I think you're right as to not to go full hog with like strangers.
Saying that with couples.
Like, dickheads, you're gonna put me? Give us your money, yeah.
So it would be maybe a good business idea. But
well, obviously, what's that diner where you get insulted? Karen's. They made a huge business out of that concept. But my take on it, for ages, I was just emulating what I thought I should do, like deeply romantic. Everything was slow-mo, and it just didn't feel like me. Yeah. But then I just kind of, I wanted to inject more of who I am into my work, which is serious, but, you know, life is fun. And weddings, I think, to do a wedding service, you have a spectrum of emotions on display at weddings. You do have really deep and meaningful kind of it's a wedding.
This is
you know?
such a great point.
It is a wedding.
I've not thought about this before.
So
That's such a great point.
You're telling somebody you love them in front of all your nearest and dearest. It's a deeply affectionate. You can't get more than that, can you?
Yeah.
But equally, it's fun. You've got all your mates in the room.
Yeah.
You're joking around. So
Yeah.
there is a spectrum of emotions on display at a wedding.
Yeah,
And
that's super. I love that. Actually,
so I think when you actually think about it, it makes perfect sense to have a mixture of emotions in your wedding film. It doesn't have to be all super serious, because a wedding isn't all super serious. And of course there's appetites for different types of wedding films.
Yeah.
And some people will want a kind of a very high fashion, very classic take on their day.
Yeah.
And that's great. But for me, I find that where I've landed and what feels most authentic for me is making edits which kind of address both.
I'm not really. Now you've said all that, that's really really connected with me, because I really feel like that's true. Like on a wedding day, I feel like almost not a skill that I have that I like to tap into. Like you mentioned before about when you take couples off, and it's just like yourself, a photographer, and then there's the couple. That's where I feel like I really can sort of show who I am. I feel like there's no one really watching me. Guests aren't going to get offended.
Yeah.
The couple are already sort of know me. They've got a rapport with me. They know what I'm sort of like, and that's where I kind of let my personality out a bit, and it instantly relaxes them. Like it just makes them feel a bit more comfortable.
100%.
But like all the actual serious parts of the day, like I'm not going to be like, you know, piping up during the ceremony or the speeches, be like, "Oi," you know, like, like making a joke or whatever. But I do still find it quite difficult, if I'm honest, like trying to balance that serious side. But I would say I'm quite good at it.
Yeah,
Like, I find it hard to balance, but I'm almost quite good at it in a sense of like, when I need to be switched on and I need to crack on and do the beats of the day, then I feel like I'm super, super, super confident at like smashing it. But then I think it's probably more so the introducing parts of like your true personality throughout the day, and then within your work as well. That's like the more difficult part.
It's just reading the room, though, isn't it? Essentially,
It is.
There are some weddings where I know I can't go. There are weddings where I can go like, I'll never be full me because I'll never work again. But like, I can turn it up to like 80%. And just crack jokes and be stupid and have fun at appropriate moments. But there are other weddings where you read the room. That's not the kind of the etiquette of the day, and you bring a different version of yourself. But that's the same in any industry. There are different versions of a person that you'll put forward based on the situation that's in front of you.
What are some of the lessons that you have learned throughout? You can either take inspiration for this answer out of either your corporate or commercial stuff or the weddings. But like, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned, and what has that like taught you?
And again, a really honest answer is like again, this sounds really wanky, so sorry. It's honestly the power of like community, and I think that there's a hybrid of kind of. So I'm a single dad. I co-parent my daughter, so I have her quite a lot of the time, which is awesome, obviously. But also I kind of work commercial and weddings. So the combination of those things means that I'm quite time short, and so historically I haven't really spent a huge amount of time kind of reaching out to people. I've just taken everything on my own shoulders and just kind of cracked on, and that can be a really lonely place, you know, both kind of for a headspace point of view, but equally, you know, just not having that kind of person to moan to or whatever it is. And I think only over the last couple of years, I've really kind of made efforts to be less insular and kind of reach out to people more, and because I've been a long time admirer of lots of people's work, and I think just something as simple as just reaching out to somebody just on their DMs, just saying your work's amazing.
I think the thing is as well is like you sort of you big certain people up in the industry in your head to the point that they're almost at like celebrity status. So you feel like you can't reach out to them, and it's like if you just say hello and start chatting, it's absolutely fine. They're not. They will speak to you.
That's one thing,
and they won't bite your head off. You know what I mean?
That's one thing that the film industry background has taught me. It's just like the reality of we are wedding filmmakers. Do you know what I mean? Like, I know there's a lot of kind of hero worshipping is too strong a word, but there's a lot of admiration in this industry for good reason. There are people out there kind of innovating, doing incredible work. But we just shoot weddings. So it's like,
I think when you strip it all back, like, I mean, I feel like it sort of contradicts having this podcast, but like ultimately, what we all do, we're just shooting a wedding.
Yeah.
Chill out, man.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Exactly that.
Life's going to continue. And like what you said before, when you're giving someone a wedding film, I like to think that it's beyond this nowadays, but essentially it is a home video. Mm-hmm. It's something that they're going to watch. They might chuck a little teaser or a highlight on social media, but generally it's for the couple and the family. I don't even think it's really for the friends. I think it's just for it is a home video. So any stresses or any worries you've got, The end.
When I like talk to new clients in the commercial world, I always kind of parrot this same kind of conversation, which is when a company that works within a certain sphere, they are very passionate about whatever they do. And so they make the assumption that everyone else cares about it because they're so passionate about that. And I always say, like, not to burst your bubble, but the first thing you've got to do when kind of marketing a product is assume that no one else cares and go from there, because quite likely no one else cares as much as you do.
Definitely, yeah. And
that really helps you kind of consider the audience and what is relevant and going to be relevant and engaging to them. And I think somewhat, I mean, it's pretty harsh to kind of translate that to weddings, but no one's going to care more about that wedding film than the couple.
Yeah.
And maybe their immediate family.
Yep.
And just reminding yourself of that, like there is a lot of outside noise going on with other people doing their work. But essentially, just remind yourself that as long as I'm kind of happy that I'm doing the best work that I can do, and I know that my couple will be happy, then you've done your job.
Yeah. What advice would you give to someone wanting to join the wedding filmmaking world that's just starting out, or maybe they've never shot a wedding before, or maybe they've shot a few, but
I don't know how kind of obvious an answer this is, but this is what I did when I started out with weddings. Kind of almost accidentally shot my first wedding, and then I thought this is fun because before I shot weddings, it was never an industry that I was interested in. Shot it. Thought I could do this. I enjoyed that day.
Similar to me, if I'm being honest.
It surprised me. If I'm brutally honest, I kind of maybe looked down at it a little bit. So I don't shoot weddings. Did it?
I think as well, especially something I forgot to ask you earlier, and it's a point that I think is relevant now, actually. So just to quickly jump in, I heard on the grapevine, and it's not. I think this is pretty much like a true thing. Yeah. That because I've got a few friends that are in the more, I would say, more traditional filmmaking industry, producing DOP and that kind of thing. And they always said that they would never really consider weddings because it's kind of like looked down upon by quote unquote true filmmakers that are producing adverts and commercials. So having some because you've sort of been on both sides of the team, is that sort of true?
So to give you a really honest answer to that, and kind of going back to what I said earlier on about why I came up with the name Toast. Yeah. It is true that part of the reasoning was kind of keep commercial and weddings separately. But if I'm being really brutally honest, slightly embarrassed to attach my name to doing weddings. Purely because, and this is so egotistical, but on my Instagram, I had mates from the film industry on my, in my personal, and I just didn't. I don't know why. I mean, I completely let go of that now. That's not a thing anymore, but certainly when I first started out. So I completely agree that there is some kind of snobbery into certain industries towards weddings, which is ridiculous because it's especially with the talent in the industry, seeing the kind of the quality of some of the kind of things that people are making.
I think half of the videographers that are in the wedding world now are more clued up about how to shoot videography than some people in the sort of more corporate commercial world. The other thing I'll say as well is I think not that you should be validated by the amount of money that you earn, but I think filmmakers probably think that wedding videographers are on really low wages and it's not a very good job. And I think they'd be surprised if they were to hear of even the average investment in a videographer. I think they'd be very surprised at that, and then the freedom that comes with that as well.
And also in the film industry, it's also smoke and mirrors. So I bumped into an old DOP.
Well, I think that's what I think that's what the wedding industry is like as well.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. Is that I bumped into an old DOP friend a couple of months ago, and he's doing he has shot Vicky McCure's latest drama, the lead DOP for that. He was B Cam for Matilda, the music, the film. Yeah. So he's got a really good CV, very talented DOP. He's literally he's got a nominated for Cannes, so he's real good. But this was a while ago. So I said a couple of months ago. It's probably last year sometime actually. And he said, I bumped into him in the supermarket. I said, how's it going? And he said, this industry, it's feast or famine. You're either doing really well or you're skint. Because the nature of most film roles is that you're a freelancer going from job to job. So you're right. It's kind of on the surface, it's this glitzy glamour job. But it's I have lots of friends that, especially through the strikes, we're really struggling for work.
a lot of videographers are using Instagram to sort of promote the work and get bookings. How are you? What's your go-to? How are you getting? Are you using Instagram?
Yes, I use Instagram. I'm not it's one of those things. Year on year, I think I need to be better on Instagram because it's just a necessary kind of evil.
Yeah.
You've got to do it. And I personally, I love Instagram. I consume a lot of content on Instagram.
Yeah.
But there are things that I know there are things you have to do on Instagram to kind of get engagement that I don't necessarily do, and that isn't necessarily kind of just rebelling against it. It's I guess a time thing, but also there's like aesthetics leaning into it.
Yeah.
So for example, 2 things that you should really be doing on Instagram is uploading vertically and putting more of yourself on, uploading stories every day, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't do either.
Yeah.
I think the vertical thing, I know I should be doing it. I know it's going to serve me in terms of engagement. I don't massively like my work vertically framed. I don't necessarily shoot for it.
It's difficult because that's the thing. Like, I think with how I approach a wedding day, whether this is rightly or wrongly, you can look at it from 2 different perspectives. I think like there's definitely parts of the day where I'm thinking for both like vertical and your 16:9, your sort of full screen. The sort of flip side to me justifying that is the fact that couples often pay or add on or want the social media, they want the vertical reels, they want to put it on Instagram and stuff.
But does it have to be vertical though? That's my question.
Oh,
if they're paying for it, does it have to be vertical?
Couples are actually they would prefer that because they consume so much. My argument would be they consume so much of that content that they're used to seeing it like that. Therefore, they would prefer to upload it like that. I could be completely wrong.
I do think that also there are certain compositions which look better vertically. So I do it. Like, when you've got a particular spot that the photographer's put the bride in when you're doing bridal portraits and it looks terribly horizontally, and then you just flip your camera vertically and automatically it looks incredible.
Yeah.
I do that, but my challenge is that I've got a handful of shots that look great vertically versus horizontally, but the rest of my footage is designed to fit horizontally.
Yeah.
And so, do I want to dilute the quality of 80% of my footage, which is always meant to be horizontal, just to appease those kind of 10 shots that look great vertically? And I know it's such a ridiculous response because
I agree with what you're saying here, because I battle with the fact as well that those shots that sometimes literally I will, like you say, turn the camera and I'm purposely shooting vertical for the reel. And it's like sometimes I think this is not the product really.
Like I said, they're paying for it for you. Like in your example, it is. It's part of the product, isn't it?
If they're having it for the teaser, then like for the little reel for Instagram, then I guess it is. Mm-hmm. But generally, that's not what I am offering. That's not really what they're getting. Really, that is like an add-on. The actual work that I produced in the actual film and the thing that they will probably, hopefully, love forever is the film.
Yeah.
But I do battle with it because I sometimes feel guilty for getting those shots, but then at the same time it's like, I don't know, it's that Instagram game, isn't it? It's it's what Instagram's doing to us all, and you feel like you've got to, and equally I feel like I've got to keep up with that.
The people that are doing really well in the industry as well, and are the people, because I think that it's a given that if you're in the industry, you're creatively minded. That's a given. It's not a given that you necessarily have a business hat, and I think there are people out there that have both, and I think there are the ones that are doing really, they found a way to monetize what they're doing with kind of e-products, that kind of thing, which I think is amazing, to be able to wear both of those hats. But part of that is just a necessity to put yourself forward, is to kind of go front first and to share, to be on the stories every single day and to share elements of your life and all that kind of thing. And it's just not, I guess it's a time thing. It's not necessarily like, I wouldn't do that. It's more like I think
you'd be great at it.
It's a confidence thing as well. Like I hate, during lockdown for my commercial stuff, I was asked to produce a series of videos, right, for kind of video creation for universities. So I sent it out to kind of to help university teams make video content when everything was shut down. And so I was commissioned to do this job. And I just literally, I reshot it like 7 times because I was obsessing about like the backdrop and the fact that my t-shirt was it wasn't a vanity thing. It was more like it was a critical thing. I was just like, I didn't like how it sounded. And
fair enough.
So it just, for me, it's a really uncomfortable place for me to be in front of the camera. And also, I don't know.
Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's just, and also like this is me out of my comfort zone doing this, because like I'll get in my head after this and just think, oh, did I come across as really pretentious, or all of this kind of. So I said before, I am an overthinker. Yeah, and that is another reason why I don't put myself out there as much. Yeah,
I mean, I agree with that. I think I'm the same. I'm quite an overthinker, and I think I try to put myself out there. So I don't know if you know about this. I mentioned it on the podcast. I think a stage of my sort of before I got into weddings, for years and years I were on YouTube. I don't know if we've spoke about this. Yeah,
I've heard about the BBC contract.
Yeah. But yeah, before that I was just like posting myself on the internet. But I weren't like, I was always a confident kid, but I was always really not self-aware, self-conscious. I was quite self-conscious and quite deep down insecure, but I think that's what drove this sort of extroverted part of me to do this as a cover-up and a barrier of like, we can't say it to him because he's Mr. Confident. It's just, I find it bizarre how those like worlds have now crossed. Like that now I'm, after so many years of not posting to YouTube, like, because I was posting to YouTube and trying to become a YouTuber back in the day, and that's something I always used to find quite cringy to say, but nowadays you can say it quite confidently because TikTok's come along and people are TikTokers, and it's like everyone don't bat an eyelid at that. It's kind of a normal thing, being like an influencer. When I was doing it, when I was at school and stuff, it was like I was a proper weird kid for doing that. Yeah. So it's just interesting how those worlds have come back have crossed over. But again, going back to what we were saying earlier about like when I was posting to YouTube, it was very comedy related. It was just pure comedy content. So like when I'm on camera, it's sort of built into me, because I did that for about 7 years. Yeah. So it's like built into me to like, it's like the monkey starts rattling in my head, and I just kind of switch off, and I start, hey, whoa, and I'm like, that's kind of how I used to be when I was doing the YouTube stuff. So like, I don't mind being on camera, but it's not really truly me. And I feel like, especially when I'm now trying to figure out how to incorporate that sort of part of my life into then this part of my life, where like I went into more serious filmmaking and being a bit more serious and trying to put that across online. In my head, I'm like, I don't want to post like just me chatting something casual, because I feel like it's boring. I want to come across and make someone at least smile or laugh, because I want them to engage in it. Do you know what I mean?
Then you are your audience. You don't forget that. So like, if what you're making is entertaining and valuable to you, then there's a good chance it'll be entertaining and valuable to your audience. Yeah, and true. It's like, it's a really difficult thing to not second guess yourself all the time, and just to. But I think that's where the magic happens, when you just kind of trust your own intuition and just make the stuff that you know that you would like to watch as a viewer, and then hopefully the rest will follow. Because if nothing else, it's authentic. Do you know what I mean? If you try and emulate something and it's disingenuous, then that's going to come across. And especially with marketing, again, I don't want to talk too much about commercial stuff, but with that, in that world, especially with a young audience, the key is always authenticity. And I think that's somewhat influenced by TikTok and like this voyeuristic almost content that's popular these days. I
think that's translated into weddings, as well. I do. I think it's come across. But I would also say to you there, listen to your own words, because I reckon if you were to listen to what you just said there, back and apply it to yourself, I reckon you get in front of the camera. In front of it.
I'll just criticise the way that I sounded. It's like my friend, for ages, I was on holiday. I didn't realise I couldn't pronounce my THs, my threes versus free.
Right, okay,
so, basically, I have a speech impediment. And,
I'll out myself on the podcast.
Harking back to my, kind of the love language of me and my mates to take the mick out of each other. My mates used to like absolutely rip the crap out of me. Like, I remember being in a meeting once, and I couldn't say the words specifically, and I was just like. I was really struggling to get it out. And methodical, that was another word. I was in a meeting and I couldn't say methodical, and I went and sat in my car afterwards and just went onto YouTube and like worked out how it was and just said it over and over and over and over again in quite a methodical way. Thank you very much.
There you
go. So that's me. That's how my head operates. So I would just full of self-doubt to do this.
You shouldn't be though. You're super talented, and I think part of me is always like, should I have to do this? Because an arrogant part of me is like, your work should speak for itself. But we live in a day and age where it's not enough. I really believe that it's not enough to just have your work speak for itself, because there's other people, many more other people, that's work is just as good, but they are pushing forward and they are doing these things. I would say the only exception to that are people that are really well established. You know, if you're really well established, you're really well connected, then you probably don't need to be seen to be doing all this. If that's not your mold for your business now, you've got it to a, you know, say you've got your business to a place where you're confident and you're like, I don't need to push on and do this, then that's a different kettle of fish.
Yeah. But not to get too deep, there are two sides to it from my observation. One side is the business justification, which is putting yourself forward as a thought leader, which I think is good in any industry, is to be like, you know, I'm going to kind of harness these conversations which are going to add value. No one's going to go on their Instagram story and say, I'm absolutely desperate for bookings. Dear Lord, book me. Or kids, I could get my daughter, like, this is Alex, she's 7. She's not getting a Christmas present unless she booked me. So I understand.
Look at her face.
She's crying because of you. She's not paying me loads of money to film your wedding. What I'm trying to say is no one's ever going to do that. So on the flip side, I understand why people go on their stories and say, you know, only one inquiry left, quickly book. But, and that, you know, a lot of the time could be truthful. I'm a bit more cynical and think, if you're really that busy, do you have to like shout about it? And from a kind of a human level, and this is the challenge, because ultimately what you need to remember is that people posting their stories are not posting for the purposes of other videographers and photographers. They're posting for the purposes of their audience. So that message will be relevant to that audience. But I just always think about, you know, not that I have a huge following on Instagram, I don't, if I posted a story like that, you know, mate who is quietly kind of sat on 5 bookings and is really worried about it. I don't want them to feel shit about themselves.
That's it.
And that's so. Like I said, it's a nuanced conversation. There are two sides
100%
to this. But it's just personally not the way that I choose to do things.
A question that I always finish on. I always ask the guests. In 3 to 5 years, Chris. Where do you see Toast Films, and where do you see yourself? Like, what are your plans? Have you got any sort of priorities that you want to set in place?
Good question. So, Toast. Where do I see Toast in 3 to 5 years? You say?
Burnt.
I don't know really. I'm kind of like it's partly why my career's been so random, film career to events manager to wedding videographer. So I'm a kind of follower of fun. Like I just kind of follow my nose and do stuff that is interesting to me at the time. And so,
love it.
Rightly or wrongly, I kind of don't think strategically that far ahead. Quite often I just live for the moment as much as I can. But saying that, I do have plans for like the commercial side. I definitely want to move more into bigger crude kind of jobs. I find that those really creatively fulfilling. On the wedding side of things, well, I think the honest answer is for the wedding side is I just want to continue doing what I'm doing now, if I'm brutally honest, which is kind of having the flexibility to kind of work with couples that align with the kind of films that I want to make. And equally kind of on more of the personal side, just continuing to kind of develop relationships with the communities within this industry, which is something that I've not been great at previously, and just kind of reaching out and spending more time with other creatives, because I think that is one thing we don't get as freelancers. You know, we don't get colleagues, and I just see immense value in kind of spending more time with other creatives.
Thank you so much, Chris, for coming on the pod. Where can people find you?
So on Instagram, I'm at Toast Films UK, and my website's toastfilms.co.uk.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you so much for coming up.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
See you in a bit.
Cheers, Harrison.